So my son, he knows that obviously his dad has a lot of tattoos. He knows that my friends are mostly the ones who do them. And from time to time, he'll tell me, "Oh, Daddy, I want your friend to tattoo this on me." And he'll tell me he wants like Paw Patrol or something on his arm. He's only 3, so he can't understand too much. But the only things I have told him so far is just stay away from your hands, neck, and face. Everything else, go wild if you want to. My name is Bryan Senatore. I'm from Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and I'm a barber. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and when I was 16, I moved down to Charleston, South Carolina. I lived there for about 10 years, and then I moved back to New Jersey. I was in Pennsylvania during the week at my mom's house, in New Jersey on the weekends with my dad. And when I was about 10 or 11 years old, from what I can remember, no explanation, my mom wanted to move to South Carolina, so she packed up me and my brother's stuff, left us on the sidewalk at my dad's house. Then we moved in with my dad full-time from there. A couple years later, I decided I didn't want to be there with my dad and my stepmom anymore, so I made the decision on my own to leave my brother behind and move down to South Carolina to my mom's house. I mean, I don't want to say I regret it, because the way things ended up playing out for me kind of, it wasn't the greatest, but it led me to where I am now. It all worked out in the end. So the first tattoos I ever got are these 2 upside-down crosses that are on my knees. They look horrendous, but I'll never cover them up because they're the first tattoos I ever got. It's kind of fuzzy because I was 16. I was also on a lot of substances. So I don't really remember. I just remember I wanted upside down crosses because I thought I was a cool, edgy teenager. Like, I'm not too cool now to admit that. Like, that was it. There's no cool story behind it. I just thought it was cool and edgy. I wanted to be the cool guy in high school, and I grew up in like punk rock and skateboarding, and that's what I thought was cool at that time. My first tattoo was in my friend's bedroom. He was trying to learn how to tattoo, and it's funny because actually 10 years later, I met up with that same friend again, and he's now a professional tattoo artist, and he tattooed me again, and it's much better than the first time. The one he gave me the second time actually looks good 10 years later. So my mom never really cared too much about me getting tattooed. My father always did. But at the end of the day, I never particularly cared too much what either one of them thought about what I was doing. I never really worried about living up to a certain standard or quote unquote, disappointing my parents like some people do. I've always just done what I felt I wanted to do. My mother started getting tattooed by my friends. I remember my mom would text me like, "Hey, is Nick free today?" I'm like, "You have Nick's number, Mom, call him. See if he wants to tattoo you, I don't know." And yeah, so she didn't really, at a certain point, she didn't care too much anymore. Like I said, a lot of my friends are tattooers, so I would always be hanging out in tattoo shops. And if one of my friends had nothing to do that day, they had an appointment cancel on them, something happened, they'd kind of just look at me and be like, "Hey, you want this thing I drew up yesterday?" And I would look at them and say, "If it looks cool, let's do it." And that was pretty much it. A lot of them don't have too much meaning. I just thought they looked cool. Obviously, a couple of them do have meanings to me, but most of them, to me, it's just art. So I've had my hands, neck, and my face tattooed since I was 18, 19 years old, which was a terrible decision. I wish somebody had told me not to do it, but nobody stopped me, so I did it anyway. I don't think a lot of younger people understand the consequences of the decisions that they may make regarding highly visible tattoos, especially hands, neck, and face. It's going to change your life. And I think a lot of younger people don't realize that these days. I kind of wish I had known that at the time. I feel like it probably would have made my life a little bit easier if I didn't get these tattoos in such highly visible places. But nonetheless, I got them, and I made it work. It was a little bit more difficult, but I figured it out. But still to this day, I can tell when people are looking at me different. If I'm in a certain place, a certain restaurant, a certain neighborhood, people do look at you different when you have your hands, neck, and your face tattooed. It's just the way of the world. I do think in the end, getting all these visible tattoos did end up being a positive thing, because over the years, I did have to go the extra mile that maybe some people wouldn't go. just to kind of overly prove that I'm not a bad person and I'm not who the other person may think I am. And over the years, it taught me just to not judge other people for anything they might be going through, whatever it is they choose to do with their lives. To me, man, as long as you're not hurting anybody, women and kids especially, I don't care what anybody does with their life. And yeah, I think having all these visible tattoos and seeing how other people looked at me sometimes, it kind of taught me what I didn't want to be like. I'm a recovering drug addict, and this June I'll be sober for 6 years. One of the last rehabs that I ended up in, I had gotten in some trouble, and the judge sent me to a long-term facility, which is at that point what I needed, meaning nobody could leave to get anything that wasn't essential. So you're not leaving to just go get a haircut. So there was one guy in particular in there at the same time as me who would mostly cut everybody's hair on Sundays. And I just remember watching him do it, because up until that point I had never been to a barber shop as a kid. My mom just buzzed my head, we didn't have money. And I remember watching him do it, and it looked like the coolest thing that I had ever seen in my life. He's cutting hair, laughing, joking, everybody's hanging out. It was awesome. So I approached him and I asked him if I could just hang out for one of the days while he cuts hair and watch what was going on. I did that, and then that night he let me borrow his clippers, and I walked around that facility and found 3 people who were willing to let me cut their hair for some reason. Don't know why they agreed to it. I'm not a barber. I'm just a guy in rehab. But they agreed, and those were the first 3 haircuts that I ever did. And then when I left that facility, this was in South Carolina, I moved back to New Jersey, and it was time to get my life together and pursue something for a career, something I could do long term. And I just thought, what is it that I wanted to do? Because up until that point, I had just been on heroin for 10 years. I didn't have any hobbies, passions, nothing. And I remember one night specifically, I laid in my bed for a long time, and I thought about what it was that I liked and what I wanted to pursue, and I landed on barbering. And here I am 6 years later. I have one tattoo that I got before I started getting high. It covers towards the inside of my elbow. And at a certain point during my drug addiction, I started using needles, and there's now a mark where that tattoo is gone in the middle of my elbow there. And even that, it doesn't bother me. I could obviously just tattoo right over it and get it covered up and it would be gone. But it reminds me of what I don't want to go back to, and the things that I used to do, and all the things that I could lose now if I was to ever go back and do that again. So I leave it there. I leave it the way it is. This is how I feel normal, being covered in tattoos this way. Sometimes I sit and I try to think how I would feel if I had 0 tattoos, and I just don't think I would feel normal in my own skin. Like I feel this is how I am supposed to be as a person. This is how I'm supposed to look. I don't really regret any of the decisions that I've made, whether it's concerning tattoos or my history with drug use, because everything that I've gone through has led me to where I am now. The pain that I went through, I now use on social media to try and help other people. I'm very public with everything that I've dealt with and still currently deal with. And I get messages and comments and texts all the time from people who tell me that I helped them. So without the things that I've gone through, without that experience, however painful it might be, I wouldn't be in a position to now turn around and try to put my hand out and help somebody else.